After 6 seasons and 400 chapters, My Hero Academia has undoubtedly become one of the most popular anime of all time. With this huge amount of popularity, you get a lot of die-hard fans and supporters, but also many haters who come with a lot of negative opinions. Some are valid and I totally agree with them, no media is perfect, but some are just straight up dumb and stupid. So in this video, let's have a look at some of these ridiculous takes and laugh at them. This take is actually kind of funny to me. At least at the start, the show is literally based on an academy where teenagers go to train their superpowers. What else were you expecting? I think we forget that these characters are still just a bunch of kids. We have entire episodes dedicated to these kids having a whose room is better contest and full on arcs based on a school festival. Yeah, we see them preparing for a fucking annual day. And if you don't enjoy this stuff, it's completely fine, you don't have to. But you knew what you were getting into. This was not gonna be another Naruto where child soldiers are a norm. Another take that branches from the previous one is MHA is generally regarded as a show which lacks any sort of stakes, cause most of the early fights in the series are fought in a closed environment with pro heroes always being there if anything is to go wrong. Basically, there is nothing for the audience to worry about. Firstly, this holds true only till the Stain fight, cause after that the school fights are still there but some insane shit also happens with it. Also, it makes complete sense for the story to not directly jump into the big fights and start off with some lighter fights, cause if the war arc happens in season 2 itself, then what will happen in season 6? Multiverse? It would also ruin the power escalation that Dragon Ball is infamous for. I don't know about you, but I would not want Deku vs Shigaraki to happen on the fucking moon, okay? But more than all this, I don't really agree with the take itself. So far, all I have said are reasons/excuses for the lack of stakes, but I don't think there is any lack of stakes, even in the earlier fights. Stakes are normally associated with some world altering events or many character deaths, big stuff like that, but stakes can hit hard and have an effect on a personal level too. For example, Todoroki vs Deku is just a semi-final match of a school tournament. The world doesn't give a flying fuck about it. But the importance of the fight for Todoroki and Deku on a personal level elevates the stakes through the roof. Todoroki going all out just to not use his father's quirk and us knowing the reason for it are stakes. And Deku's drive to make him accept himself through his finger-breaking skills are stakes. Deku winning this match would get him to the finals, but that was never his purpose to fight. It was to get Todoroki in his senses, cause giving help that is not asked for is what makes a true hero, and My Hero Academia always emotionally connects you with the characters. That is why even high school fights have a great impact on the audience. And in some ways, I prefer having realistic backgrounds to the characters, cause I can relate with a kid having anxiety issues over a kid whose entire family got murdered by his own brother. I think all the previous points can easily explain this take. MHA starts off as a very light-hearted series with a clear division between good and evil until the character of Stain is introduced to us, who shows us a grey area in the story by exposing just how broken the hero society really is. It's unbelievable to me just how important this character is to the story. He left an impact that can be felt even after he is long gone. This take is super popular and I actually agree with it. I mean, on one hand there's Deku who got one for all just cause he ran into a villain and threw his bag at him, and on the other hand you have Mirio who got a quirk that is almost impossible to master but still gave his best and became the strongest student of the UA Academy. And he did all this without once whining about the situation he is in, but just uplifts his head and smiles like a true hero. But there's a catch. Now, all this would matter if it was even possible for All Might to give one for all to Mirio in the first place. You see, later in the series, it is revealed that because One for All has been evolving for 8 years with different users, it got to a point where the quirk has gotten a little too powerful and was too much for a human body with already a quirk to handle it. The power will just overflow, ending up killing the user with it. So I don't know if Deku deserved it, but Mirio factually just could not get it. So him being more worthy doesn't really matter. Okay, this will be a long one. This complaint regarding the fights of MHA started getting really popular when All Might vs All for One first aired in the anime, and it is pretty much the last fight that featured this one-track style of fighting. I do agree that before this fight, most of the fights do not have many complex strategies and are very simple, ending with 30 seconds of pure hard work and skill presented on our screens through absolutely breathtaking animation sequences, or to put it simply, Sakuga. But past All Might vs All for One, this absolutely does change. Deku vs Bakugo, Deku vs Gentle, Deku vs Negant, these fights already show off much more complicated and strategized fight scenarios than any before. Now that we know that Horikoshi can choreograph great fights, let's try to understand why he chooses to sometimes take the simpler approach. Cause even later in the series, we get many fights that go back to that one-track style of fighting, like Deku vs Overall, Endeavor vs Nomu, Deku vs Shigaraki, and all of these fights are great, but when you think of some of the best fights in other anime, you think of the choreography of Naruto, the sheer ridiculousness of JoJo, and the heavily complex Nen fights in Hunter x Hunter. They all have their unique selling point on how to make a great fight, but in MHA you don't think of beautiful direction or complex storyboards. The mantra here is to go beyond plus ultra, which on surface level is super close to I couldn't come up with anything unique, so All Might will defeat a super cyborg who has been artificially built to sustain All Might's hard punches by punching the cyborg harder. Yeah, that actually happened. Despite all that being said, we all love these fights. I mean, how the hell can't you jump out of your seats bursting out shouting during moments like these? So after rewatching the show for the 7th time, I think the fights in MHA are not actually fights. No, I've not gone insane, hear me out. The fights in MHA are more like climaxes to character arcs that are just happen to be finished with a fight. Now take a look at All Might vs All for One. I know I keep coming back to this fight, but I can't help it, it's the fight that encapsulates everything about Hiroaka. Now as hype as this fight was, you can't deny that if you actually look into it, it's just an old man continuously breaking his arms to defeat another old man who has the ability to use any power he wants, but for some goddamn reason only uses a fucking air gun. But we all know this fight was not great because of the action, but the emotions behind it. All Might throwing his last punches to uphold his identity as the symbol of peace. It was him going away with the last year, emerging victorious to keep the trust and hope alive for heroes and inspire the next generation. It was him bookending his chapter in the story and passing the torch down to Deku, as now it's his turn to do what All Might did for the hero society. It was us, the audience, watching and cheering a man who gave it his all to save a single human. It was us, the audience, watching and cheering the end of One for All, the end of the story's first act, and the end of an era dominated by an unfathomable figure of trust, and it all boils down to this harmonious symphony of elements that when put together created a scene that didn't just go down as one of the best scenes in anime, but went down as the scene that this modern generation of anime will remember for years to come.